Hi, my name is Sajjad Muslihi. This is the first video of the modeling video series that I introduced you to in the previous video. Here, I'm going to teach you how to model single-phase fluid flow in a single-pore porous medium and also in a fractured porous medium. This is the output of the single-pore porosity medium model, and this is the output of injecting water into a fractured porous medium containing water. And as you see, the injection well is located here and the production well is located here, and this is the fractured porous medium. And we'll get to these outputs at the end of the video. All right. So let's talk about the code. As I told you, in this video I'm going to talk about single-phase fluid flow. In the next video I'll talk about multi-phase fluid flow, which is almost the same. Just the boundary conditions and the number of governing equations is a little bit different. And the fluid that I'm going to consider here is a slightly compressible fluid. And I'm going to use the properties of water for this model. All right. Of course, water is kind of incompressible, but as you know, it has some compressibility. But it's even more incompressible than rock. But it has some compressibility, and I'm going to consider it as a slightly compressible fluid and actually use the properties of water in this model. All right. And at the beginning of the simulation, and for the first scenario, I'm going to use actually a one-dimensional porous medium, and the water is injected through an injection well into the first cell of the model, and the production well is located in the last cell of the model, which I'll talk about in a minute. All right. As you certainly know, this function CLC is to delete or clear all the things that are in command window. Clear is a built-in function which is used to clear all the variables in the workspace, and the built-in function close or close all is used to close all the figures open on the computer, if any. All right. Now it's time to actually define the geometry of the model and discretize it. First of all, I have specified the number of cells in each direction. I have used the built-in function deal to distribute the input arguments to the output arguments here. So I have 50 cells in the X direction, 1 cell in the Y direction, and 1 cell in the Z direction. In the next line, I have specified the length of the model in each direction, which is actually the total length, all right? Here I have written 5,000 feet, which is the total length of the model in X direction, 1 foot, the total length of the model in the Y direction, and 1 foot is the total length of the model in the Z direction. Now it's time to actually introduce these values to MRST. Here I have used the function cardGrid, which is a built-in function in MRST, in order to define the geometry of the model. The first input argument of this function is the number of cells in each direction, which is this. And the second input argument of this function is the lengths of the model, or the total lengths, it's better to say the total lengths of the model in each direction. And this function returns struct, which is written G here. So G is a struct. The function cardGrid returns a struct which contains the data of the geometry of the model. So let's run the code to see exactly what is inside this struct here. All right. So now we can see what is inside the variable G. And as you see, this is struct, and it has some fields. The first field is the data of the cells of the model. The second field of the struct is the information of the faces, the information of the nodes, the number of cells in each direction, the type of the grid, and the number of dimensions of the model. Of course, although we see that actually the grid is one-dimensional, but because we have specified these actually numbers here, it considers it as a three-dimensional model. But if I don't specify the number of cells in the Y and Z direction, it will be written here 1. So let me run it again. And as you see, 1 is written here. All right. And even if I don't specify the length in the Z direction and the number of cells in the Z direction, it will write 2. All right. That's it. Great. So we defined the geometry of the model, and I'm going to use the function compute geometry in order to actually obtain some other information about the geometry of the model. This function obtains, for example, the volumes of each cell. All right. Now that I have run this line, all right. As you see, the information of the cells is this. But if I run this line of code, some other information will be added. As you see, the volume of each cell, the centroids of each cell actually are added here, and some other information is also added in the other fields of this struct. All right, now it's time to see what the grid, what the geometry of the model looks like. All right, this is the geometry of the model, and actually there is a problem here. Oh, actually I have not, let me specify the number of cells in the Z direction. As you saw, it was two-dimensional, but I'm gonna have a three-dimensional model. So let me run it again to see the grid. And as you see, this is our grid. And this is only discretized in the X direction. All right, we've got 50 cells or 50 grid blocks in the X direction, and the number of cells or grid blocks in the Y direction or Z direction is 1. All right, great. Now it's time to define the rock, what the properties of the rock are. Here I have used the function make rock in order to introduce the data of the rock to MRST. This is the first input argument of this function, which is the grid data structure defined previously. The second input argument of this function is the amount of permeability, and the third input argument is the amount of porosity of each cell. But because I have written only one value, or MRST considers that all the cells have the same porosity, or all the cells have the same permeability equal to 30 millidarcies. All right. But if the model is heterogeneous, in other words, if each cell has a different value for porosity or permeability, we need to input a vector here, or a vector of permeabilities here, or vector of porosities here. All right. Here I have specified the rock compressibility. Why? Because I'm going to consider the rock compressible. And as the pressure changes, I'm going to consider the effect of pressure on pore volume. And that's why I have defined an anonymous function here. Using this anonymous function, I'm going to consider the effect of pressure on pore volume. And as you see, this is the rock compressibility. This is the pore volume at the reference pressure, and this is the reference pressure. How the pore volume at reference pressure is calculated? We use the function pore volume in order to calculate the pore volume of its cell. Of course, this is a very simple thing to do. We don't have to use this function to calculate the pore volume. We can do it even ourselves. PV ref, let me choose a different name for this variable. In order to calculate the pore volume, we only need to multiply the volume of each cell or grid block by its corresponding porosity. All right. So we have the volume of its cell here, G dot cells dot volumes. So we used the volume of its cell here. If we hadn't used the function compute geometry, we wouldn't have the volume of its cell. All right, and that's why we use the function compute geometry to compute the volume of its cell. And as you see in the beginning, actually as you see in the following of the video, we also need the centroid of its cell for pressure calculation, and the centroid of each cell was calculated or was computed using this function. So that's the reason why we use this function to obtain those additional data. All right, great. So what it was doing is to calculate the volume of its cell, G dot cells dot volumes dot times porosity rock dot poro, which is the porosity of each cell. Let me run the code to compare the results of these two lines of code, and to make sure that the results are the same. Alright, it's a little bit slow. Let me do it again. Alright. Oh, it's very slow. Let me talk about the next section of the code. Here I have defined actually the properties of the fluid of the model. The viscosity is 1 centipoise. The fluid compressibility is this, and the density of the model, the density of the fluid at the reference pressure is 62 pounds per cubic feet, and here I have defined an anonymous function in order to consider the effect of pressure on fluid density. So I'm going to consider the effect of pressure on fluid density as well. All right, and this is a similar function to the previous function. This is the fluid compressibility. This is the fluid density at the reference pressure, and this is the reference pressure. All right, great. I'll use all of these anonymous functions in the following. Don't be worried about it. Now it's time to show you, how pressure change affects, the density of the fluid. I don't know why, it didn't work. Let me run it again to see what's going on. It's gotten very slow. Maybe there's a problem. Yeah, this button didn't work at all, but this button worked. Great. Let me, pause it here. All right. Great. Let's see. Oh, let me run it again. Let's put a breakpoint here, and this is the plot of fluid density versus pressure. And as you see, the fluid density at the reference pressure is 62, and as the pressure decreases, the fluid density decreases as well. All right? Great. This is the effect of pressure on fluid density. Great. Now it's time to specify where the wells are and what their properties are. Here I have used the function add well in order to add the injection well to the model. The first input argument of this function is an empty array. Why? Because previously I have not defined any well, so that's why this is an empty array. The second input argument is the grid data structure. The third input argument is the rock data structure. The index of the cell in which the well is perforated, which is the first cell. This is the name of the injection well, which I have specified, and this is the radius of the well. This function uses these data in order to, for example, calculate the productivity index of the well. All right, and actually I'll use the productivity index in order to calculate, for example, the production rate of the well. And in the second line, in this line, I have added the production well to the model. And as you see, this is not an empty array anymore because we have already defined another well, which is the injection well. So we need to put this variable here. All right, and this is the same. This is the same, and this is, as I told you, the index of the cell in which the well is perforated. And because this is a production well, we want to have the production well in the last cell of the model, and so this is the index of the last cell, which we got here. This is the name of the production well. This is the radius of the well, which is the same as the injection well. All right. Actually, what this function returns is a struct, which I will show you in a moment. All right. As you see, this is a struct, and it contains the data of the wells. And there are some other information which I have not specified, but actually they are the default values of those fields. All right, great. The first line is the data of uh, the injection well, and the second line the data of the production well. All right, the properties of the production well. Great. In this line, I have received the index of the cell in which actually the injection well is perforated, and this is the same for the production well. All right, here I have actually received the productivity index of the production well. Why? I need this value because I'm going to calculate the production rate. All right, here I have specified the injection flow rate, which is 20 stack temp barrels per day, and this is the bottom hole pressure of the production well. All right, so I don't have the flow rate of the production well. I have the bottom hole pressure. So how can I calculate actually the flow rate of the production well? I need to use actually some equations like the Van Pullen relation, and actually there's another relation which I can't remember. Let me take a look at my notebook to see. Yeah, we can use the Piesman model in order to calculate the production rate, all right, by having the bottom hole pressure. All right, great. Here I have actually specified, or I have imposed vertical equilibrium in the model. This is really useful when we have a three-dimensional model. Why? Because when we have a three-dimensional reservoir, the pressure changes in the vertical direction. All right, so I need to calculate the pressure of each cell. All right, the pressure of each cell is different when we move in the vertical direction. So what I have done here is to calculate the initial pressure of each cell in the vertical direction. So what I need to do is to specify the reference depth. I need to know actually I specified a reference pressure, but I have no idea what depth that pressure is at. All right, so here I have specified that depth. Great. And here I have calculated the pressure gradient, and in this line I have calculated the initial pressure of each cell. I'm not going to get into the details because we're running out of time, and if I'm going to talk about all of them in details, it'll take me at least an hour to make this video. All right. Let's see the pressure distribution in the model. Let's run the code to see the pressure distribution in the model. Of course, because it's one-dimensional, there's certainly no pressure variation in the model. All right. This is the pressure distribution. As you see, all the cells have the same pressure, equal to 3000 psi. But if we have a three-dimensional model like this, 5000, or I'm not going to change the lengths. I'm just going to add cells. I'm just going to discretize the model in the Y and the Z direction to see the pressure change. We didn't even need to discretize the model in the Y direction because it doesn't make any changes. And as you see, there is pressure variation in the vertical direction. And as we go deeper, the pressure increases. Great. Now it's time to calculate transmissibilities. First of all, I have calculated the half transmissibilities, which have been talked about in the book of MRST, and then I have calculated transmissibilities, which is actually the transmissibilities of interior faces. Great. Here I have defined the discrete differential operators, which I'll use to define the governing equations that I need to have. Alright, this is the gradient operator, this is the divergence operator, and the average operator. I'll talk about these operators and their applications in the following.